The book of the Red Panther carries sound advice, pun intended, on the importance of listening to your mount and heeding the coded warnings it gives. Can you distinguish the rumble of main bearings from the knock of a big end? Test yourself on this, the sound which spoiled my perfect day. And once more, bearing in mind that I only closed the throttle to tick over. A friend and enthusiast for old and interesting motorcycles was telling me about his recent acquisition, a supercharged DKW split single, a two-stroke from the 1930s. Of course, I invited myself to see it, and that's where we're bound today. I've chosen a motorcycle from the same period, the Red Panther. But why am I telling you? Because you're not going to see this exotic race bike, nor come to that am I, not on this trip. I can't fault the 250's engine on starting, and as a riding day this couldn't be bettered. Comfortably warm, dry, and not a cloud in the sky. After 2 or 3 miles the air-cooled engine is nicely warmed up, and the Model 40 has the bit between its teeth, bounding gleefully over the long, choppy fenland straights. On a single track road with passing places, I nip through against the traffic and make use of a car in front to clear the blind bends. What passes for a hill in the fens brings us to the former island of Eye Village, Panther pulls cleanly around a dust cart in the 20 mph limit and dawdles happily by the school. With about an hour's trip each way on remote byways, I'll top up the tank before we leave civilization. There it was. I have a sense of misgiving over the way in which the engine died. Cutting out with a little chiff is unusual behaviour on a bike which normally ticks over cleanly on a closed throttle. But I'm committed to my fill-up, not yet accepting the possibility that my riding day may already be over. I pay and push off the pumps, pull on my gloves and kick. No compression. You can hear me turning the problem and the engine over in disbelief. This busy exit is not the place for diagnostic checks. I push across the road and try again. It sounds as if the engine is blowing back through the carb, except when it doesn't. Maybe it will sort itself out. For a moment it comes back to life, and then all compression is lost. Reluctantly, I pronounce the red dead in the gutter and push into a quiet side road. With luck, I can raise Angie before she gets too deep in her garden activities. She comes back by the immediate magic of the text, and my rescue is assured. Anecdote alert. In the blissful calm of having made it someone else's problem, at least for the moment, I recall a rally ride back in the 20th century, when my outfit cooked its magneto and left me stranded on the gritty verge. No pocket mobile phones then, and precious few phone boxes. I knocked at a nearby house. Could I please make a free phone call to the AA? You'll have to pay anyway, said the rather fierce woman who came to the door. We had the phone put in specially for people like you. I didn't protest. Some comfort anyway in knowing that the world does contain people like me. Her husband watched from an adjoining kitchen. You get a lot of breakdowns along here then, I commented, when the call was made and I had paid the requested fee. He rubbished her with a single word. Nah. And I was rescued, then as I am today. But the AA took a little longer. Such problems don't result in sleepless nights, but they do occupy my spare waking moments until the puzzle is solved, first in my head and then on the bench. It's a couple of weeks before I make a moment to raise the Model 40 to working height. If you know engines at all, you may have already reached my preliminary diagnosis, a poppet valve issue. Broken piston rings would not result in such a sudden and complete lack of wind. If we ignore that brief restoration of service, there is a remote possibility of a holed piston, but surely I would have heard signs of detonation, the pinking death rattle on previous rides. And we both heard how sweetly the engine ran. Which raises the question why a valve might seize suddenly 2,900 miles after a rebuild. Yes, it's that long since Little Red took to the road. I think we can rule out a valve stem nipped in the guide, unless through lack of oil. OK, let's bite the bullet and take the lid off our can of worms. And by the way, if you take exception to my metaphors, feel free to mix your own. Here's the sequence. Fuel line off, remove tank bolts front and rear, saddle off, remove tank, undo umpteen rocker box cover bolts, and wangle free the decompressor lever. The push-on exhaust system is attached at the silencer by a single bolt and a nut to the frame lug. Oil drain pipe on the near side comes off a banjo at the top and a gland nut at the crankcase. On the right, removing the rocker oil feed gives access to the pump output, and we can test our first theory: oil supply failure. A few prods at the kickstart reassures us with a flow of oil. So its carburettor off the studs, unscrew the top and remove from slide and control cables. Rocker spindles are secured with nuts and spring washers. They slip free to remove the rockers, the piston at top dead centre on the firing stroke to take pressure off the valves. Lift out the push rods and remove the pushrod tube. And I've done it again, haven't I? The video that I took of cylinder head removal, 5 nuts and spring washers, has gone to the land of lost ball pens and odd socks. I did take a photo of the loose carbon sitting on the piston. A small fragment of that trapped between inlet valve and seat would defeat combustion, like a blood clot breaking away from the side of an artery and stopping the little bike's heart. Would we expect enough blowback to push a carbon fragment back that way? My mind is leaping ahead, looking for causes. It uses oil, yes, but less than our heavyweight Panther, and that's never built carbon to this degree. And all this is after less than 3,000 miles. A piece of advice I read long ago was to put a chisel point on a stick of solder to clean carbon off a piston without damage. In the past, plumber's solder has proved softer than carbon, but it does work today, though I have to resort to an old chisel on the barrel spigot. When I assembled this engine for the Model 40, I sought Pitman's advice on cylinder head fitting, which registered a change from a ground joint between head and barrel in 1939 to a cylinder head gasket. The faces were not in the greatest condition, but a copper gasket fitted outside the spigot and sealed perfectly. Unfortunately, it does leave a gap between head and spigot, where carbon has built up. I'll grind the faces together this time, removing barrel studs by the time-honoured method of locking 2 nuts together. While consulting the Pitman Handbook, I also read this passage. Decarbonising. After the first 1,000 to 1,500 miles have been covered on a new engine, and subsequently at intervals of 2,000 to 2,500 miles, an engine usually exhibits signs indicating that it is advisable to decarbonise it. So there is the answer. We have almost 3,000 miles on a new engine. Reboard, new piston and bearings I think qualifies, and it's not been touched since. So the Red Panther didn't break down. It merely exhibited signs that it was advisable to decarbonise. Then it's out with the valve collets using a spring compressor, a winkle pin and a magnet on a stick. There's carbon on the valve seats and some signs of pitting. I'll spend some time grinding in the valves, and then we can put the engine back together. In place of a head gasket, I apply well seal, belt and braces. Modern manufacturers often publish assembly torque figures, and owners of old motorcycles sometimes feel disappointed, if not actually aggrieved, that none can be found for their machine. Difficult to measure torque on these head to barrel nuts because access is limited to ring or open-ended spanners. But the length of their shafts does supply a hint to the force required, with incrementally reduced leverage provided with each smaller size of spanner. A good rule of thumb is to stop when it hurts, but do bear in mind that this doesn't work on brass fittings. And if you want to know how tight an oil union or carburettor jet should be done up, your best and severest tutor is that faint tick as the threads shear. Buy new parts with your own pocket money, and you'll know next time. A minor repair issue came up during the year, and this seems an opportune moment to tackle it. The contact breaker points cover is Bakelite, an early, rather brittle plastic, and it has lost the ear for its top fixing screw. A previous superglued repair failed in spite of my gentle touch on the driver, and I'm casting a new lug with JB weld, reinforced with a wire loop, superglued into holes drilled in the cover. I cut out the base of a kitchen spread tub and use gaffer tape to create a crude mould. This is filled with the two-part epoxy, warmed gently with a heat gun to let it flow. When the camera is off, time stands still. So there's no waiting for you spectators. Peel off tape and trim with a Stanley knife. Remembering the golden rule. Both hands behind the cutting edge. Are you listening to me? Shape with a disc in the rip-off Dremel. Finish with fine files. Mark centres and bore for the screw. The repair cures dark grey, but a black Sharpie pen soon blends it in. With carburettor and oil feed attached, I note the need for some new copper washers on the drain pipe. And then it's back with a tank and seat and nip round to the lawnmower shed to nick a splash of E10. A first start with no exhaust system. Childish, maybe, but I still remember the thrill of turning a little Norton into a big one with a pair of reverse cone Megas. put the exhaust back and kick again. It sounds fine, but we're working in January, the off-season for this Red Panther, so a full road test must wait for the warmer days.